What if the most exhausting thing about growing up isn't figuring out who you are, but the invisible weight of holding your whole family together? Today, we're exploring how Elemental captures something rarely shown on screen: the relentless emotional labor of immigrant daughters. Elemental is set in Element City, a place where fire, water, earth, and air elementals all coexist, but not always easily. Ember Lumen is a young fire elemental living in Firetown, the neighborhood her parents, Bernie and Cinder, built from nothing after immigrating from the Fireland. Bernie has spent his entire life running the family's shop, the Fireplace, with the dream of one day handing it down to Ember. She has spent her entire life preparing to receive it. When a city inspector named Wade stumbles into the shop and discovers code violations that could shut everything down, Ember is pulled into a race to fix the problem before her father finds out. What follows is a story about a city, a shop, and a daughter who has been quietly burning herself out long before the audience realizes it. From the very first scenes of Elemental, it is clear that Ember was never really given a choice about her role in the family. The film opens with a flashback showing Bernie and Cinder arriving in Element City with almost nothing, building their shop brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. Ember is born into that story, and with it comes an unspoken inheritance, the expectation that she will carry it forward. She does not just work in the shop, she manages it, smooths over difficult customers, and absorbs every complaint so her father does not have to. This is emotional labor in its purest form. It is the work of keeping everyone else comfortable, stable, and okay, while quietly setting aside your own needs. What makes Elemental so sharp is that it never frames Ember's role as villainous or even particularly unfair. Bernie is not a bad father. He loves Ember deeply, and his dream for her comes from a place of genuine pride and sacrifice. But good intentions do not cancel out the weight of expectation. Ember has internalized the belief that her feelings, her ambitions, and her limits are secondary to the family's survival. That is a deeply specific kind of pressure, and it is one that daughters in immigrant families are more likely to carry than anyone else in the household. Elemental is quietly in conversation with a real and well-documented experience. Research on immigrant families consistently shows that daughters shoulder a disproportionate share of both domestic labor and emotional caregiving. They mediate conflicts, translate not just language but entire cultural worlds, and serve as the emotional regulators of the household. Ember does all of this without anyone asking her to, because by the time the film begins, it is simply who she is. Her explosive temper, which the film presents as her central flaw, reads differently once you understand the context. Ember is not just an angry person. She is someone who has spent years suppressing her own emotional reality to manage everyone else's. The outbursts are not character defects. They are the inevitable result of a young woman who was never given permission to have needs of her own. Wade, whose element quite literally flows and expresses itself freely, becomes a mirror for everything Ember was never allowed to be. The Fireplace is where Elemental does its most interesting work. For Bernie, the shop is the physical proof that the immigration was worth it, that the sacrifice paid off, that his family made it. For Ember, it is a beautiful and suffocating thing. She is good at running it. She genuinely loves her parents. But the film is careful to show us glimpses of who Ember might be outside of those walls. A gifted glassblower, someone with her own artistic instincts, her own way of seeing the world. The shop and the self are in direct conflict, and for most of the film, the shop is winning. This is the emotional core of Elemental that tends to get overlooked in favor of the romance. Wade is sweet, and their love story is genuinely charming, but the real transformation in this film is not Ember falling in love. It is Ember giving herself permission to want something for herself, perhaps for the first time. The most powerful scene in Elemental is not the climax or the romance. It is the moment Ember finally tells her father the truth, that she does not want the shop, that she has something else she wants to do with her life. Bernie's reaction, his grief, and his eventual acceptance is the film's most honest beat. It acknowledges that these conversations in immigrant families are not easy. There is real loss on both sides. But having the conversation at all is the point. Elemental ultimately argues that love is not the same thing as self-erasure. Ember honoring her parents does not require her to disappear, and a daughter choosing herself is not a betrayal. It is the beginning of something real. So the next time someone calls Elemental a simple love story, remember that at its center is a girl who was never taught that her own feelings were allowed to take up space, and slowly, carefully learning that they are. This is Ladies First, watching women in movies. Here, we empower women by reviewing and discussing films that highlight their stories, struggles, and achievements. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.